Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if I could get everybody to take their seats, please. Okay, before we open the workshop meeting, Mr. Van Zandt is going to offer the invocation and pledge.
Pray with me if you wish. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, we thank you for this blessed weekend we had, Lord, just past this most holy of Sundays. Lord, we thank you for the work your Son did on the cross to redeem us and redeem the world and forgive us of our sins. We thank you sincerely for that. We thank you for those that stand watch today all over the world, Lord, to protect the freedoms that we enjoy, just to even come together in this room and meet as a group of citizens, Lord, to steward the resources of this district along, Lord, and decide the direction that we should go to serve the students first, Lord, and the people that serve the students themselves. Lord, we ask that you be with all that are bereaved and infirmed. Lord, continue to be with those around the world that have been the recipients of atrocity and terrorist acts by the hands of cowards, Lord, and bring them to justice. All these things we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to call to order today's workshop meeting, the Clay County School Board, March 29th, 2016. Mr. Van Zandt, I believe you would like to introduce Dr. Jim Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We are very, very honored to have with us and have had in our district last week and again today Dr. Jim Hamilton. His biography speaks for itself, but I'd like to just hit a few highlights. Well-educated gentleman with a Ph.D. from that university out in Tallahassee. He holds a master's in social science education and a bachelor's in social science education from the University of South Florida. This gentleman has held every position in the Hillsborough County public school system, starting with that of a custodian up through classroom teacher, assistant principal, principal, every assistant superintendent position, deputy superintendent, and chief of staff. I've had the pleasure of hearing him several times present on the Florida Education Finance Program at several meetings of the Superintendents Association, the School Boards Association. He is one that those in office seek out to truly understand what is going on with the budget as it pertains to education in the state of Florida. Really and truly, at this point in his life, he works for the betterment of those districts that he serves and does private consulting. And I won't go on any more about him other than he's a man that knows what he's talking about. He has helped lead our district staff through a process and is here tonight to illuminate what this year's budget coming out of Tallahassee will do for us and give us some good information to base some future projections off of. So with no further ado, Dr. Hamilton.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah, and while
before we continue on, you probably need to state for the record that Ms. Karakis is out of town.
Thank you. I was just getting ready to do that, yeah. While Dr. Hamilton was coming up, I also wanted to state for the record that Ms. Karakis is absent today, and also for those of you who are just coming in, we will be taking yellow cards for the second half of this meeting, so you can find those in the back. And you can, if you'd like to speak at the end of the meeting or on the special meeting item D2, you are free to do so. So you can turn those cards in to Ms. Cornegay. Thank you. Dr. Hamilton.
Good afternoon, board members and Madam Chair and Mr. Superintendent. I appreciate your hospitality and the opportunity to be here in Clay County. I have done this kind of work now for quite a long time, it seems like, in many different school districts. Big ones, small ones, and in between size. And I tell you that not for any reason except that you should understand that that message which I'm about to deliver is a common one shared by most of your colleagues around the state, and the issues that you're facing and will face and must address are those that are faced by every district with which I've worked, I think just about every district in the state, and quite frankly by most of your citizens around their dinner tables every night. Your situation is no different than theirs, and is in fact a reflection of their realities. It's they who provide us the resources to do our work. I'm going to review a few things sort of in this order. I'm going to start with what was just passed, the budget that was just passed. I provided significantly more detail for your staff. I've tried to simplify things that just focused on the immediate impacts on the district as a whole here. I'm going to then take a look at the next year. I want you to realize, and some of you have been where I've talked before, the budget is not a document, it's a process. It doesn't, in some respects, ever have a beginning and an end. And the time to start thinking about 2017-18 is about the day after you'll adopt your final budget for 2016-17 in September, because on September 15th, the Legislative Budget Commission meets, and they adopt the 3-year financial outlook, which will essentially be the basis for the following year's budget. And I can already show you some of those outlines, and I will, because you should be able to see, or should want to see, as far in advance as you can. The state looks 3 years ahead, because the decisions you make today and tomorrow will still be around to be addressed 5 years from now, unless you take that into account in your decision making. I'm going to take a look back then at how you got where you are and how the state got where it is, in as simple a language as I can make it. That gets a little more convoluted and seems like when I say it, but it really isn't. It's still essentially what your teachers are teaching in 3rd and 4th grade. I have a 4th grade granddaughter, so I still know what's going on in 4th grade. And I have another granddaughter who's training to be an elementary teacher, so I have 2 ways of knowing. It's not any higher math than that. It's just decimals, you know, and some digits, place values. But it's a complicated process that got us where we are, and it'll be a disciplined and complicated process that'll take you forward, if forward is where you want to go. I will want you to understand that some of the monies that we speak of are monies that are spoken for when they're granted, and I'll point those things out. And I'll take questions anytime you want, although probably if I start and end, you might be better served and hear the answers along the way. I'm going to say something to begin with that I don't want to forget, because I think it is of utmost importance. The Florida legislature is not a band of mean, evil people intended to provide you with the most misery possible. Although there are many days where I'm doubtful about that as I go about my duties during session, because they're very stressful. But when it comes to money, if they are better served by giving you more than less. There's no immediate conspiracy to give you less. There have been some specific policies put in place for the last 20 years or shortly thereabouts that have shaped where monies are available and where they're not. Those policies reflect the leadership that's been elected by the people of Florida to lower taxes and restrict government, and that includes the funding that comes to public schools. So you are a feature of that process. You're not a fixture or a target of that process. That is those who we have put in power, and they're doing exactly what it was that they promised they would do. But the people who work with us, the folks that are on education committees and both the House and the Senate in particular, I mean, some folks don't have any idea what goes on in this part of the budget, but they know a lot about water. And some of them know a lot about cattle and agriculture, and some of them know about Medicaid, for example. But those folks who do work in good faith to try to do the best job that they can do with the resources that are available, and that's what you're going to see. Sometimes the rhetoric is problematic to me, and I've said this in public enough times to feel fine about saying it in public again. It does not serve us well when we focus on rhetoric on things like the highest funding in history. Because while that might be a mathematical fact, depending on which slice of history you choose as a comparison, and we'll discuss that, It still doesn't leave us without our challenges because the resources haven't really kept up with all that we needed to have kept up with. And that is not just us, that's the folks over there at Publix and folks over at Walmart that pay sales tax, and that's the folks in the city councils and county governments and everywhere. But when we say it that way, and then you're faced with a zero-sum game at the end of the budget, you are hard-pressed to explain that, and my duty today is to try to clarify why that is in fact the case and what it is you can do about it. Sometimes there's a few things that we forget. First of all, there is no pile of money in the basement in Tallahassee. That's a parking garage down there. The money that you are getting ready to work through a budget for is money that will be collected during the fiscal year, just like your salaries. And just like the mortgage that you're going to pay in June of 2017 is based on the salary you think you're going to make in 2017 June, so is the money that you'll receive in the bi-monthly payments from Tallahassee, money that is projected but not collected. And that means that that is subject to change, which is in fact what happened in 2007-8 and could happen tomorrow. You have a tragedy like we had in 2001 on September 11th. We went through 5 special sessions cutting the budget that year. We had 2 in 2007-8 when the recession crashed the budget. Those are realities. That's not a guarantee. And when you plan, you should plan with some contingency in hand for those unforeseen circumstances that do occur. The state provides you with a fairly minimal guideline in that regard. You get below 3%, the superintendent has to notify you and the commissioner that you're below 3%. You really need to indicate how you're going to get back above 3%. 3% won't keep your lights on for 6 days, more or less. That's a fact. It's not what Dave Ramsey would have you keep in your emergency fund. He'd say 3 to 6 months worth of it. You're never going to get 3 to 6. That ain't going to happen. The state says to itself, in the budget stabilization fund, there must be no less than 5%, no more than 10%, because you shouldn't tax people who put it in your bank account, in their budget stabilization fund. And then beyond that, they try to hold on to another 4 or 5% of roll forward monies to take care of the small bumps in the road. And if they spend any of that money, they have to have a plan to replace it. And if the fund gets bigger, they got to add to it. That's closer to where you should be, quite frankly. And what happens if that doesn't happen? Well, I've been in that position too, not on the receiving end, but on the delivering end. Because you get below 2% and you don't have a satisfactory financial recovery plan, the Commissioner of Education will appoint a panel to come in and take over your financial operations. And then they'll send somebody like myself. I have served in that role in some districts. And I'll come in and tell you how you're going to spend every dime. Period. That's what happens. It ain't the most fun you'll ever have in your job. So all the things we do have consequences, and we just need to run a sound, student-focused, frankly, given my background and my granddaughter's orientation, teacher-focused and staff-focused operation to deliver great services to kids and do it with the dollars that we have. There are no dump trucks coming down I-10 with money. That isn't happening today. It isn't happening tomorrow. It isn't ever happening. You should assume that. If you look like I do at the trends over years, and I did a little of that for you, you'll see that that's the reality of the situation. Last year we got 3% increase per student. This year 1%. Next year I project 0% unless something happens in terms of increases. And I'll show you why. If you want to do stuff for kids, if you want to do things for your employees, you need to find the money with the money you have and spend it differently. That's what I spent a day or so browbeating your staff about, and that is the only answer there is, because you don't have any authority. You know that, right? You have no taxing authority that's not either granted by the legislature or by the people in a referendum. You cannot raise money independently, period. So, with that kind of as the table, you got a handout, it's a couple of pages, summaries, 435 pages of the budget. And these are the things that happened this session. The legislature passed the General Appropriations Act, which was House Bill 5001, and for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017, the language in that bill is law, which means that you must follow the law as prescribed in what's called the proviso language, which specifies how each line item will be spent, with particular provision to precision in the area of the Florida Education Finance Program and some other parts of the budget too. But I don't live in those parts of the budget. It also passed House Bill 5003, which is the budget implementing bill, which modifies Florida statutes to conform to the proviso language for 1 year also. Every provision of the implementing bill expires on June 30th, 2017 as well. And finally, House Bill 5005 passed, and that increased the rates for the Florida Retirement System employees that you currently have. And that's about the 4th or 5th straight year that that's occurred. Ever since the year they cut it, which we're going to talk about that little bridge over troubled waters, they've been restoring the cut. The only thing that's still cut is the 3% that they essentially, there's two things that are still cut. The impact of the cost of living adjustment, which has not been restored, will not get restored, and the money that was moved from the employer's contribution, they call it, to the employee's contribution, they call it. Now, I don't really argue with the legislature, but I know that when I go to church, I give a contribution, and when I go to the IRS, I give it an assessment, and this is more like an assessment because I got to do it in church where I get to decide. So I call them the employer and employee assessments. That was set in House Bill 5005. This is what you got out of it. You got an increase in total funds. You want to flip that switch on? I don't know how to flip switches really well, so we just kind of do a quick graphic illustration. Your total funding increased $6.42 million, which was about 2.5%, most of which is tied to the growth of students in your district. The student enrollment has increased 716 students, which is pretty good percentage growth for a district your size. You got to pay for those. By the way, they don't come free. Back in the really olden days, before I was in these kinds of positions, it was not uncommon for districts to take growth money and just raise class size. Well, how much we're going to increase the allocation? We'll go up 2 kids in a class, and then we got this much money for raises, and that's what happened. And that happened, and that happened, and that happened until the people of Florida took the matters into their own hands and passed the class size reduction amendment some 14 years ago, and now that can't happen anymore. So each one of those students brings with them a mandatory obligation to provide them with a teacher at the specified ratios that you as constitutional officers are required to maintain, and I'm assuming that that's what happens. Over the course of the amendment being in place, the students and classes to which it has applied has shrunk. I have lobbied against that effort for a variety of reasons, all of which I thought were sound, having to do with the intent of the Constitution and the realities of the budgeting process, which you'll also see in just a moment. So, out of those students, about 250 of them are projected to go to Florida, your charter schools, either the new ones or the old ones, but regardless, you're going to go down a couple hundred kids. And that is a positive outflow of money which you cannot recuperate. That's gone to your competitor. And that'll cost you about $1.75 million in round numbers. So now you're down to about $4.67 million. Then, in addition to that, you got to pay for the impacts of the students' allocations necessary to support them, the new students, the ones that are left. And your district staff estimated that cost to be about $2.6 million based on their original allocation formulas. That leaves you about $2.07 million of new money. And then the Florida Retirement System rates are going up, and your share at 1.33% of approximately $34.8 million is about $450,000, and that's, you can't spend that money anyplace else. And then you have received an increase for your digital classrooms allocation, and it was an increase in the base from $250,000 per district and lab school to $500,000 per district and lab school, which has created certain discrepancies across the state that sooner or later will have to be addressed. For example, if you were the Broward County School District, the lab school in Broward County students will get about $800 a kid for digital classrooms work, and the students in regular Broward schools will get $17 a kid. That's kind of problematic to me, but they didn't ask my opinion about that. At any rate, you also got a few more dollars per student, roughly 50 cents a kid increase, but all that money you're obligated by law to spend to buy digital devices such that every school will have sufficient devices to deliver the Florida Standards Assessment to a full grade level at a single sitting. And until you meet that standard, you can't spend the money for even any other digital reason, and then you still have other obligations in your digital classrooms planned for that money. So that takes you down to about $1.37 million new dollars, which was what you would have for initiatives, raises, health insurance increases or decreases. I don't know where you stand there, but that's what you have in new money. Your staff subsequently, after we met last week, went to work, and your employees in those positions worked to essentially neutralize to the largest extent possible the increased cost of the allocations for the new students, and that brought those funds down, that cost down about $2.2 million. And that, I am concretely sure, as I'm standing before you, is not a precise number. It may be up a few bucks from that down, and will certainly change, because I don't think they're done trying to do that. I think they have a commitment to try to double their result. At the end of the day, you've got about $3.6 million of new monies to work with, a large part based on their work and their commitments to your boys and girls and your employees, and you as board members and the superintendent. And I've done that work with other districts, and very few of them have jumped in with the commitment that your employees did. And of that, you should be proud and grateful. There's a couple of other things of importance in the budget that's not related to your operating budget. In specific appropriation 114A, there was $1.5 million allocated for specific projects for capital outlay purposes for public schools, and Clay County got $1 million of that for the academies of Clay. And most districts are interested in VPK. There were no increases in funding for VPK. The base student allocation was maintained as it was. There were actually no increases statewide in funding for your workforce development money programs either. Whether yours went up or down would just solely be based on enrollment. So, proviso language is important. I point out a couple of changes there. I'm just going to keep on trucking because this is not that complex of stuff. In one place, the proviso language now will have recalculations done of the big categorical called the Exceptional Student Education Guarantee, and the big categorical called the Supplemental Academic Instructional Allocation. Since those two were created, they were not recalculated, which means that during the school year, if what happens, you get a fixed amount of money. Once the appropriations bill passed, that's it. That's all the money. Ain't no more. If more kids show up, then the pie stays the same. The slices get smaller, but those two slices didn't change. That really was moot in many respects. That was like more show than tell, because those pieces didn't get smaller, the other pieces had to get smaller still to offset the recalculation of funds. And that's the bottom line. But that will be a certain degree of uncertainty there for sure. And they're both being done for similar reasons. There was a big increase in the allocation for ESE students. That was subsumed as part of our conversation about your total funding increase. That's not in addition to that. And which mostly ESE programs cost more than that anyway, so it's still essentially an impact to your general budget, which is the way we treated it here. Okay. And likewise, the other big change was $52 million for the lowest 300 schools in reading scores, because that has not been funded for these years. It has just been a mandate to spend those monies for those purposes. You don't have any of those. So that was $53 million you didn't participate in. Now, I understand there's a superintendent up the road that trade you some schools for some dollars if you want to do that, but I haven't seen anybody line up and take that deal. I offered it in St. Johns County too, but they didn't take it either. The federal connected student language, you do benefit from that. There was something put in place last year, mostly through the initiatives in Brevard, Santa Rosa, and Escambia counties, where I also work. And you benefit to the tune of about $500,000. That was sustained. It was also in the implementing bill, and more importantly, long-term for your planning, because that's a fair amount of your freed-up money. House Bill 7029, assuming the governor does not veto it, he still has the bill, contains that being put into language permanently. I always put that in quotes because it's only as permanent as the next session, of course, but in all likelihood it would be maintained. Now let's look ahead. First, let's stop. You okay so far? You're not too glassy-eyed yet. You're doing good. I'm going to look ahead another year, and I'm going to mention that when we look back historically in just a second, but we'll start right now. What you do this year should be constrained by or informed by what is likely to happen next year. In the work we did during session, it was a great concern to the staff and members of the appropriations world that the current look of the currently adopted 3-year outlook would generate a negative result in the FEFP next year, which would mean a decline in the dollars per student. And that is simply because that 3-year outlook, which is nothing more than all of the expenses pushed forward 1 year and all of the revenues for general revenue pushed forward 1 year, wound up with no money, period. During this session, there was a change in policy with regard to local funds for the Florida Education Finance Program. For many years, there was an allowance that a determination they would hold the millage rate more or less constant for the required local effort, and if the school taxable value increased, then that would generate more money from the local funds. There was a bit of a dispute about tax cuts this year in the Capitol. Don Gates, who was a Senate Education Appropriations Subcommittee chair, guy from my end of the panhandle, was kind of concerned that the governor was taking his victory tour for the tax cut budget while he was allowing property tax payments to increase. That caused a bit of a dispute inside the Senate. Other senators, like David Simmons from Seminole County, pointed out that that increase had nothing to do really with my taxes going up. They had to do with the fact that down the street, and I passed many places here in Clay County, and I saw tons of them over in Osceola County, and even see them in Leon County. You know, where there used to be 5 acres of trees on the corner of Park and Magnolia and Tallahassee, there's now Starbucks and a hotel and a bunch of other stuff. Those trees didn't pay any taxes, those hotels do, and that was what generated that new money. And Senator Simmons argued that there should be an analysis done to show what components might be realized by an increase in assessments versus an increase in value added because of changes of use. He didn't win that argument this session, and if that remains the case, then we have shut off what amounts to about $500 million a year in new revenue, which is kind of odd because we always say growth pays for itself. You know, you're urged to use COPS to borrow money against the future value of the increase in your property values caused by students moving here. If those students move here and their new house goes, I saw some place where there's new houses here, you got some, and where that new house went, where that student lives, they're not going to generate any revenue for you out of that new house that's where there used to be like a marshy pasture. And that's a problem long term, because now there's only one source of revenue, well, 3, but one that matters is the lottery, which provides about $300 million for your operating budget this year. There's the principal state school trust fund that comes from selling or claiming abandoned property. That's $150 million a year. And general revenue, which is all the rest of state money, which is about $9 billion a year. We have to share that pot with every other need there is out there. And we are not the only needs. There will be, for example, as I point out, current revenue estimates show currently the general revenue estimates for 17-18 are $300 million less than the general revenue estimates for 16-17. And that's just a mathematical fact. And it's caused by the fact that some of the tax cuts that were put in place a year ago and 2 years ago were backloaded and increase over time. And they're increasing more rapidly in their impact on the budget than are the projected increases in collections. There's also a downturn of revenue in this current projection that was done on January the 19th that funds the budget we're talking about now for 16-17 of $400 million. That also translated back and added to that problem and made that number problematic. So we have what's left is about I'm looking for my specific numbers, and I'm usually a little less dopey than this. You're going to have several increases in expenditures. If we take the current budget and roll it forward as it was passed, the total general revenue budget was about $30.3 billion. You roll that forward, assuming that all those things get funded, and then you fund just two items that will increase. One would be the increased 26,000 students that are expected. That's about $186 million at today's dollars per student. And you roll forward the replacement of the low-income pool funds that are going to finish expiring with next fiscal year. It's about $400 million in this year's budget. And you add those to the budget and compare that to the revenues, there's a fund balance of $100 million. That fund balance is normally $1.5 billion. That's what they normally carry forward. I am not sure that their policies will allow them to appropriate that much of the available revenue. And clearly, there's no money there for other increases. If we had a 1% per student increase in next year's budget, as we had in this year's budget, which has been a strain, that's about $205 million. That's more money than there is. And that's not the only cost that's out there, not the only cost that's going up. So there'll either be cuts in the way spending is made somewhere. There may be some substantial changes in how health care is delivered, how LIP is dealt with, but we will not be immune from the impacts of these things. And I'm just telling you, you should start your planning for this year, assuming that if you want substantial new money to work with going forward, then find it in your current expenditures. And change the direction of those expenditures to fund the things that are higher priorities to you than what they were. You can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. That makes you like me and everybody else in the world. That is what looking forward looks like. Questions about that? No? Okay, I gave you this thing called Historic Funding Comparisons. And it's a 3-page, fairly poorly written explanation of two spreadsheets I gave you that look like this. Okay? One of those spreadsheets is statewide revenue comparisons, and the other is Clay County. And you can tell because the title says Clay County and statewide. Somebody's looking around. You got it? You'll kind of want to follow along. So here's what we're looking at. We're going to try to show you where your budget got to where it is today. And I have a state chart to show you that you are not unique. If you look at the items to which I will draw your attention for the district, the same items look the same, just bigger, more digits, at the state level. So when I tell you, for example, that in Clay County, if you compared this year's projected funding for 16-17 for instructional materials with the year that the legislature, with the budget that the legislature has decided is the highest budget in history, you would find that you have about $500,000 less for instructional materials than you had 9 years ago, even though you have 1,233 more kids. Now that's just facts. But it helps to show you have a problem inside your internals of your budget. Now, if you looked at the state numbers for the same comparison, you'll see that statewide instructional materials are about $37.7 million less, and there's about 177,000 more kids statewide. So you're not different. You're the same. I might belabor that by going over each line item for a minute, but I might not. Depends on how tired you get of hearing it. So what you have is a statewide funding comparison, and what it says is that let's first talk about historical highs. The statewide chart shows you 2002-3. If you looked at the statewide chart, that's the filled-in column farthest to the left. And I put that there to show you what's happened since class size. And the point is that a whole bunch of money has gone to pay for class size, about $3.1 billion of all of the money that's been approved for the last 14 years. In your sheet for the district, and similarly for the state, the next column looks at the first calculation of the FEFP for 2007-8. That was the first budget passed by the legislature that year. It was a real live budget, Marco Rubio was the Speaker of the House. Ken Pruitt was the Senate President. Charlie Crist was the governor. And they passed the budget, and they signed the budget, and you got the budget, and you were told, if you were on the board at the time, give good raises because we gave you the money for that purpose. I believe Joe Pickens was our little chair in the House at the time, and J.D. Alexander was the Appropriations Subcommittee chair in the Senate, and they were great advocates for public education, and they put a boatload of money in there, both for funding the increases in class size and for teacher salaries. That's where they wanted the money to go. And I think you all did that, by the way. I think you adopted the budget and you closed your negotiations early that year. You were done before school started. The only problem with that was that in October the economy crashed pretty thoroughly. So that was passed like April 28th, I think it was, of 2007. In October 2007, the legislature went back into special session, and they passed another budget that, among other things, cut the FEFP about $265 or $70 million, and then you had to cut the budget that you just passed and deal with the people you just employed and the raises you just gave. That's what you had to do. And then that wasn't enough. And when the regular session started for 2008, during the first week of regular session, the legislature went back into special session and passed the second budget for that year, which was the revised third calculation. And that's the budget that they have determined was the highest in history. That happened to be, of the FEFP calculations that occurred that year, there were 7 of them. That yielded the lowest dollars per student average of the 7. I don't know what that means. I'm just saying, I think their position was that was the last one that passed, so therefore that's the one that counts. In my world, at the time I was just coming out of the district, just retired, but I had to go fix some of that. There was almost $600 million of FEFP funds that were cut from the first to the third revised third calculation, and you just figure you're 1.33% of that, more or less. That's what you had to do, and you had to do that at that point. It was March the 8th. You had like 3 months left in the fiscal year. So that's where your problems began. In making comparisons, I added some other information. There's a third, so let's just look at your chart, and let's make sure you know what to look at. The first column for your chart is the first calculation for 2007-8. The second from the right, or left rather, from the left, is the revised third calculation, which has been identified as the historical high. The next column is this current year's third calculation. We don't have the fourth calculation yet. It should be coming along here in about 3 weeks. But that was what they had at the time the budget passed in the early session. And then there is 2 blank columns, and between the 2 blank columns is what you got for this year and this year's budget that just passed. And then there are 3 columns showing differences. One difference is comparing the budget that just passed with the first calculation of 2007-8, which represents all the budget cutting that this district had to do. The second column represents the historic high number, which refers to the cutting you had to do from that point. And the third column, which in some respects is the least consequential for this discussion, is the difference between the budget that just passed and the one that current fiscal year that you're in, the third calculation. So, if you look at those numbers, just kind of cut into the chase, in the second from the right column, let's just take the legislature at their word, and we'll call that the comparison time, knowing that that ignores about, well, you went from $263.8 million to $251.6 million between the first and the revised third calculation. So that just ignores that $12 million worth of cuts that had to be made. That means that they had to be made. But ignoring that, you'll have grown in your total potential funds in 9 years $10 million. That's what you've done. Period. That's it. That's the number. I didn't make that up. This is a simple spreadsheet. I know how to do Excel this good, not any better than this. I got a big old calculator number thing that I can do that with. That's the number. 9 years to go up $10 million from where you were after they had already cut an additional $14 million. Which means at that point you're $4 million in the hole compared to what you really started with in terms of your budget cutting. That's what that means in American English. Of the $10 million that you're up from their historic high. You had 1,233 students that you had to serve. That cost about $8.6 million of that $10 million. There was an allocation in that process for teacher salaries, which we were glad to provide. That was $6.1 million. And right now we're already over the $10 million. And there's a $1.1 million digital classroom allocation has to be spent for those purposes. So you've had 3 had-to-dos that were more than the total funding increases. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means that if you did not diligently cut your budget and rebase your budget to conform to the bottom of the recession, not the recession at the revised third calculation, and not the recession bolstered by the various temporary measures that were put in place to get you across the gorge, if you didn't do some substantial long-term changing of your budget, you're going to structurally be out of balance until you do. And if you're assuming that you're going to get increases of 4 or 5 or 6% a year to do that for you, I'm telling you, you haven't done it. It isn't going to happen. I'm telling you that. I know how much money is in the pipeline. I know what the philosophies and the direction of the people in charge and who are going to be in charge for the next 6 years are, and it's not going to change. The only thing that is likely to happen is that it'll get worse. I can't conceive of the economy getting that much better without fueling some kind of bubble that also bursts like happened the last time. Remember that bubble that burst, when some of the money that went away, we were getting $4 and $5 billion a year in dock stamps in general revenue. General revenue is fueled, among other things, by dock stamps. That went down to something like $500 million at one point, $1 billion. It was decimated. And the only monies that were coming in were people refinancing their mortgage. They wouldn't lose their house. But all those houses that people bought on spec to flip, they all crashed, they went away. That money went away and it hasn't come back, and I don't see it coming back. I don't know how many more parking places they got at Disney World, you know what I'm saying? But that's what's generating the economy right now. That and just building houses in the villages. That's kind of what it amounts to. So, let's see what else this means to you. If we go back to the narrative, I want to just kind of use it to help explain some of the items that are on the spreadsheet. You can kind of refer the two if you like. Okay? I'm going to skip the very first part of that page, which essentially all that stuff is a narrative to the statewide chart. Again, to show you that you are no different than everybody else. You have the same problems, the same duties, the same opportunities, the same challenges as everybody else. That's all that says. This gives you a lot of specifics. Then I talk about what happens here within the district, and I again refer you to what those numbers really are or what they aren't and that kind of stuff. Now if you go to the second page, there's 2 kind of like bundles of, looks like a chart without lines. And what that does is, the first one compares the major categoricals inside the FEFP with the current projected, the new budget, and the first calculation of 2007 and 8. And the second set of those numbers compare the just past budget with the revised third calculation. Either way, you can see that there were a lot of lesses and not too many mores there. And that's just simply doing the work of tracking from one column to the other and pointing out what those little tiny numbers, because I don't know how to make the font any bigger and still keep it on a page, what that says. That's what that tells you. And if you look at either one, when you see that you've got 1,233 more students than the historic high, $64,000 less dollars for safe schools, $2.1 million less for ESE, $857,000 less for transportation, roughly $500,000 less for instructional materials. You do have more money for digital classrooms, but you have to spend it for that. And you do have more money for class size reduction, but you have to spend it for that. You can see that embedded in the nuts and bolts of your operating budget, there's some structural shortages. And you will have had to make cuts inside your budget to essentially reverse those negatives to restabilize your budget. That's what you have to do. And to the extent that you didn't, you spent fund balance, or you didn't provide raises or whatever, but you can't do those things without creating your own money. If you go on to the back page, Again, we're taking a look at these kinds of things. And I tried to find another way to say this. So I'm going to skip down to the bottom half of the page. It starts on the third paragraph. I'm going to semi-read this to you, which is insulting, and I apologize. Here's another way to analyze what happened to you. It's a little different than what's in the chart. I advised the governor's staff one time that they should be measuring their budgets not based on a comparison to the historical high, but the historical low, because what he was responsible for was filling the hole. He wasn't responsible for what was before the hole. They didn't see the logic in that. I thought it was pristine myself because it's true. And that's what this is telling you right here. This is taking you to the deepest hole. Remember that when the budgets crashed, when the economy crashed, we had these temporary measures in place. The very controversial stimulus package, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And very controversial, but we cashed the checks, ladies and gentlemen. We cashed the checks. So much for controversy, we took the money. It's about $890 million, $850 million a year. The legislature spread it over 2 years. The notion was there's a big hole we're going to fall in, let's throw some boards across the hole. But you can't ignore the hole because the hole's not going away. And then the next year, there was a teacher jobs package, which we were instructed at that time. Denise Grimsley was our House big chair, House Appropriations chair, and J.D. was the big chair in the Senate. He said, don't spend that money this year. Supplant local dollars because you can't carry the teacher jobs funds forward because that's going to be the first 3% of the FEFP next year. I was sitting in the Legislative Budget Committee hearing when he said that. I kind of already knew he was going to say that because it's logical. So that was another board over the gorge. And the FRS rates were cut that year, and the changes were made in how our employees were compensated and essentially reduced. And that was another $850 million a year, but that was temporary too because one of the things they quit doing that year was funding the unfunded actuarial liability in the FRS. Unfunded. You hear that word, unfunded? That means they run out of money. They can't do that forever, and they only did that for a year or so. Then they started to put that money back in place. And they didn't call it a contribution or anything. They just said your rates are going up. And they didn't put any numbers in the FEFP saying you got less money. Although when they took the cut, they did put something in the FEFP says you got more money. But when they took the money back, they didn't put any money and say you don't get the money. And they didn't do that. So let's use that as an example. And here's what happened. In 2011-12, you were at about $221.7 million in total potential funds. That's after the third calculation, after you had a chance to actually count your kids because you lost some that year. That is about $42.1 million below that budget that started this process, the real first calculation of 2007-8. So without any bridges, you would have had to cut $42.1 million of what was then a $263 million budget. That's why they put temporary measures in place. That was pretty traumatic. They tried to buffer schools, teachers, and students from those impacts. But that's what you would have had to do. Then, I don't know what you did. I didn't go back then. Didn't have enough money to pay me that much. It's a lot of work. And not terribly relevant. You know what's gone on, or you can find out easily enough. But we do know one thing that did happen, and that was the year that they cut $11.5 million, that was the impact here, on the Florida retirement system rates. So the hole that was $43 million deep now became $30.6 million deep. That was what they did with the hole. Then in the years going forward, they began to appropriate more money. I have it with me. If you really want to know, I'll tell you how much they did each year. If you don't care, it doesn't matter. But with that new money came some additional costs. $6.1 million to this district for the teacher salary allocation. That was a must spend. $4.8 million has been restored to your obligations for the Florida retirement systems. And you got about 1,536 more kids, which is about $10.8 million in costs. I didn't get into all the class size stuff and so forth. I just rolled it all into your growth costs. It's simpler and for our purposes equally elegant. So what that meant was you had a hole that was left after they helped you with the Florida retirement system. You had a hole that was $30.6 million deep, and now we added $21.7 million to that hole. That's what that did. So now your hole is $52.3 million. And in the years since 2011-12, you've received about $39.9 million new dollars. So we had a hole, we dug a deeper hole, we filled some of the hole. At the end of the day, you're about $12.4 million short of being at the surface of the earth. If you haven't made $12.4 million worth of continuing ongoing reductions in your budget from that period to now, then you're still spending fund balance. If you've stopped spending fund balance, then you've sort of reached the end of the hole. But if you want to stand on higher ground, you're going to have to dig some other hole somewhere to pile the dirt up to stand up higher. Does that make sense? It's that simple. There's nothing complicated about that. That's the reality. And I encourage you to do that, because I just got through telling you next year is going to be, then I don't see where they have money for 1%. I hope I'm wrong. If I'm wrong and we get a 5% increase, I'll come back on my dime and tell you I was an idiot. Really. And we'll all have a good time, we'll have a party, because that's the right kind of mistake to make. I don't see anything in the data to support that as an outcome. For sure. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but it probably won't. And one last thing I'll mention, because I think it's important to you as a board, as you work with your employees, is what happened with the Florida retirement system that was not in the rate bill. In 2011-12, the language in the Florida retirement system with regard to the cost of living adjustment was changed. Knowing, by the way, that the legislature has had as a policy objective for many years closing the pension portion of the Florida retirement system. They don't believe in sending government checks to anybody except themselves and their friends. At any rate, they don't believe in sending government checks. So they want to close that out. They think that's an obligation to the taxpayer. Well, my answer to that was, I gave you 37 years of my life. I don't think that's a bad return on investment. I asked my kid, who I wasn't around for while I was being a high school principal. You know? But what they said was, in essence, anybody employed on or after July 1st, 2011 would not earn a COLA for the years of service starting on July 1st, 2011. If you were employed but in drop, you were technically retired, so that didn't affect you. If you were retired, like I was, it didn't affect you, because they have a contract with me that they can't break. At their peril would they break it. So they have to continue. Okay? They do understand the sanctity of a contract. So for anybody not already retired, each year that you were in place, there's a formula. It's kind of esoteric. I'm not going to read it to you because it's boring. But the bottom line is this. If you had a 30-year career and you started on July 1st, 2011, in 30 years you'd have no COLA. Because in essence it reduces the COLA 1/10 of 1% a year for 30 years and phases it out completely. That's in essence what it does. So the new hires have no COLA. If you were an employee in place July 1st, 2011, just make this stuff up now like it was meaningful. Round numbers, so it's easy. It's not quite technically accurate, I do know that, but it's sufficient. You were a 20-year employee, you worked 10 more years after July 1st, 2011, you dropped. You are now officially retired. Your COLA would be 2%. You have lost 1/10 of 1% for each of those other 10 years, but they can't take away the portion of the COLA that you earned for the 20 years that preceded the change. And I could do that 6 times in different ways. It's all going to be the same illustration. The language in the statute said, subject, this is paren 5 of Florida Statutes 121.01, subject to the availability of funding and the legislature enacting sufficient employer contributions specifically for the purpose of funding the expiration of the cost of living adjustment specified in subsection 4 in accordance with section 14, article 10 of the state constitution. The cost of living adjustment formula provided for in section 4 shall expire effective June 30th, 2016, and the benefit to each retiree and annuitant shall be adjusted on July 1st thereafter as provided in subsection 3. So what did that say? I went around for like 4 years saying, well, it's just going to go away. That's not what it said. It said they got to give us the money for it to go away. Otherwise, it doesn't expire. It says subject to the availability of funding and the legislature enacting sufficient employer contributions, there's that word again, specifically for the purpose of funding the expiration of the cost of living adjustment, it'll expire. Well, they didn't do that. It isn't going to expire. It is quietly dead. I do not anticipate its grave being reopened. It is an effective way of closing the pension plan, because you would not advise, I don't think, a new hire anticipating a 30-year or 40-year career for signing on to a pension that they're going to have to live on for the next 30 or 40 years with no adjustment. Although if they were as excellent in the stock market as I am, they'd be better off, because at least they'd have dog food. They wouldn't have no food, you know, because I'm not any good at that part. I was one of those employees that thought I was supposed to, like, take care of kids, not worry about finances and stuff. So I never learned how to do the stock market. We will eventually change the employee we get to be very money conscious and money seeking, and I hope we'll be happy with that, because that's the transformation that we're creating. And I don't know whether that's really going to be loved so much when it's all said and done. But I think as a board, and you work with your HR folks and your deputy superintendent, your superintendent, I think you have an obligation to new hires to just, you know, make it clear that, barring a special session to raise your, and by the way, that number is the better part of $500 million to restore it and do all the stuff. I think it is anyway. The data that was provided at the time it was cut was not very clear and itemized. I know it's a great big number. There was about $850 million saved from the change. Much of that came from the 3% change, but much of the rest of that came from the closing of the COLA. There was a couple other things they did. They moved the retirement age back to 33 years and 62 or something like that. But those were relatively minor, way out actuarial kind of impacts. These were the ones that were big, and this would be very expensive, and there's not that kind of money. And they're not committed to that policy, so that is not going to happen. So, that being said, I think that I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. I think that you should be aware that on any given day, for the right amount of money, I can come to your district and cut 10% of your budget. I just have to be out of town right away. Do you understand what I mean by that joke? It's not really a joke. It means that those changes are not easy, and they're not without some consternation and some consequence. But if you expect, for example, you want to pay your people more, you're going to have to find the money. If you want a better set of academies for Clay County students, you're going to have to find the money. You're doing some things that you've been doing for 20 years that you should keep doing for the next 20 years. You've been doing some things for a year that you shouldn't do another moment. Unless you are exquisitely different from every other organization in the world. That is the fact of life. And because we always did isn't the only reason to keep on doing it. If I learned that, well, maybe I'll lose this weight, but I haven't learned that for my life yet. But for you, there are solutions. I have worked with districts who have done this. I have worked with districts who have not done this, and they struggle and sputter along, and their academic achievement begins to flatten, and their fund balances dwindle, and the employees become problematic. You have not fully rebased your budget. I'm telling you that. I saw some charts. I have them here. The superintendent can give them to you, I'm sure, that kind of track your revenues and your fund balances and so forth, and it's pretty clear. I mean, it's just reiterate another way of looking at what I just said. I think you're flattened out, which means that, you know, if you had some cuts in place, I am sure you did. You had to. I would have been here and taken over by now. So you had some cuts, and you've somewhat stabilized things. And some of what you did was just simply impose it on expenses you didn't make, things you chose not to do. The question you have to ask yourself is that the best decision? In the world where I have worked, I eventually built a near $400 million fund balance by not accepting that. Because I thought everything should be examined and there should be no sacred cows. I was convinced sacred cows make good hamburger but bad milk. And everything should be on the table, because that's the only way things get better in any organization. Doesn't matter if it's Apple Computer or Clay County Public Schools. And you can't wait on a gift from heaven. If you get really great at what you're doing financially, I'm not saying you're not, but if you got really outrageously great at what you're doing, and you really had something you could point to and say, I need this money for that right there, the voters here will give you an extra $1 for your operating budget. I know that because I've done it in a number of places at least as conservative as Clay County. Orange County's had 2 elections. Sarasota County's done it half a dozen times. Pinellas County's done it for more years than I can remember. Gulf County's done it, for God's sakes. You know? I mean, I live out there west of the Apalachicola River. I know what's out there. Places like Escambia County, Santa Rosa County have voted sales taxes for their construction money because they don't have any of that. The point is the voters will support that which they believe has been thoroughly vetted and is pointed at the things that they value. If you ever wanted a windfall of money, that's how you'd have to get it. Other than that, what you would have to recognize is that since the recession started in earnest and we reached the bottom, at the bottom most year, the average dollars per student decreased 7.96%. As the recovery started, the average dollars per student increased 2.41%. That's the real measure of what your new money is allowing for growth, not to be messing up the calculations. The next year, the average dollars per student increased about 6%. That's the year that we got $1 billion. $480 million was for the teacher salary allocation, and $300 million was the FRS rate increases. That's why that was so. If you took those two out, the increase per student for the money that you get to spend for textbooks and so forth was zilch. That's a fact. Okay. The next year was 2.61%. Last year it was 3%, and this year it's 1%. So the degrees of the target really is to get us up to 3%. There was a day in my life when we used to have a 1% minimum guarantee in the FEFP. Make sure everybody got an increase of at least 1% per student. That was taken out of the FEFP some years ago. Okay. So somewhere between 0 and 3. They don't like 0. They know that's bad policy and bad politics. But they'll struggle next year to get 1%. And I don't expect to see in a year, any time that I'm still doing this, that'll be more than 3%. So if you want substantial increases, then you've got to find the money. That's it. That's the deal. Questions?
Anybody have any questions?
I can think of one, but I don't know that he would answer it politically. But it just occurs to me, you know, you hear things about the governor wanting an extended political career, and I can't imagine for the life of me how that could be very lengthy when he comes out and tells the public, I'm giving more money to schools than I've ever given before, and this is what we're really faced with.
Public believes what it believes. You got elected twice. There's 2 more times than I've been elected. Just for what it's worth.
I don't think I have anything. Do you have anything, Ms. Gilhousen?
No, I thank you for
Yeah.
this information. It's very helpful. Appreciate your
I'm
presentation.
sure you can do good.
I appreciate the simplicity of it and making it very simple to understand and providing this information for us.
You got your work cut out for you, but you
Not
know what? You got
necessarily.
employees working for you to make that happen.
Right.
And a superintendent is committed to continuing that effort. And you got a nice community, and you got some great kids, and been in places that have none of the above, really. I mean, they're just in tragic condition. And that's not you. So you've got much to be grateful for.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to open the floor for any questions from the audience. We'll be taking questions only at this time, just on the presentation or the material that was presented. Would anybody like to come forward with a question? Okay. Well, with that, I am going to adjourn the workshop meeting, and I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we will come back and open the special meeting. Okay. Yeah. Okay, if we could sort of come back together and take our seats, we're going to resume. Okay, at this time I would like to call to order the special meeting of the Clay County School Board, March 29th, 2016. At this time we have one item for action, which is the 2016-2017 proposed staff allocations. But before we get to that, we have a number of yellow cards, so I'll call you up one by one. First card is, and please forgive me if I say this wrong, it's hard to read, John Stelmazek. Did I say it right? Yeah, okay. You have 3 minutes. And
good afternoon, everybody, and members of the board. I'm addressing you today in hopes to encourage you to reconsider cutting 3 career specialist positions in Clay County. I understand that these cuts approved the job duties that are currently done by career specialists will be absorbed by guidance counselors and academy coaches. Guidance counselors, as we all know, are already overwhelmed with their workloads, and to the point that they cannot necessarily deal with that workload. I myself have dealt with this as my students in Clay County schools in high school have had a number of problems dealing with legal documents, dealing with getting information to colleges. I have a senior this year where she's going to be going to college and hopefully dealing with the athletic scholarship. That being said, we've had a lot of back and forths and misses in communication that have led to a lot of struggles for my daughter and her having to deal with it personally. So just to make it be known, personally I've got a lot of help from these career specialists. They've really helped and provided the needed guidance where the guidance counselors don't have the time due to the fact that we don't meet whatever requirements that they have for the given time. The career specialists played an integral role in the academies long before the wall-to-wall design has happened. They've been here and really helped our students stay on course with their graduation rates and have the ability to gain valuable real-life experience. They work diligently to counsel, like I said, not only my students, but the students across the Clay County. Sorry, I'm looking at the timer. I'm a personally active member of the Academy IT board. I meet with the board quite regularly. Unfortunately, I wish we could do it more. That being said, the career specialists have really brought to bear the abilities to deal with not only us as private citizens in the community, but also our business partners. They have been our biggest advocates in getting partners dealing with students and matching students with a career path, whether that be through partnerships directly or dealing with other stuff. That being said, there are only a few allocations for these positions, but I think they make a world of difference to our students, including my own. They've touched and changed lives for the better of many of our students. I'd hate to see the impact of losing them here in Clay County. Please consider voting no for the allocation proposal. I'm the only one of only many parents that feel the same way, and I wish that this was at a time period where the rest of the parents could be here and say what they have to say. Thanks.
thank you. Diane Chisholm.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Chisholm, and I'm a certified health specialist for Clay County Schools. My colleagues and I just recently found out last Thursday afternoon that the school board will be voting on whether or not to eliminate the Too Good for Drugs program and the Healthy Choices program, along with the 5th grade puberty ed programs from our schools, effective next year. I believe the elimination of these programs would create a gap in the vital education of our students. It's upsetting to know that the students and families will fail to benefit from the positive education regarding drugs, alcohol, and sexual health. I'd like to read you a list of reasons as why they need to continue the program. The average teenager has been exposed to more sexually explicit movies, TVs, shows, games, alcohol, tobacco, magazines, ads, and materials that we have in our entire lives. As much as some Americans would like to hold on, the days of Ozzie and Harriet are over. Teenagers are bombarded by sex, alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. What they are lacking is health education, drug prevention, and how to make healthy choices. Young teens are notorious for misinformation on drugs and sex. It is much better to teach children about drug prevention and sexual health in school rather than letting them use other resources such as peers or the internet. This is important because avenues such as these store a huge amount of information that might be misleading. With problems such as teenage pregnancies, transmission of STDs on the rise, it's only appropriate for health education to be made accessible in school, where most children can be made aware. Sexual health can help the children understand the benefits of abstinence and how to be responsible adults. We experienced health educators have numerous hours of training and are constantly learning, researching, and updating our subject matter. Many regular classroom teachers who are forced to teach sexual health to students that are not experts, and they may have vague ideas about sexual health themselves. This is even more harmful as incorrect information is extremely lethal, as it can actually leave a wrong impression on the students. Children have an impressionable mind, and incorrect information imparted at a young age can actually transform them into ignorant adults. The fact is that in most schools, sexual health and drug prevention is treated like an extracurricular course and not a primary one. If the authorizing body is not serious about it, then they cannot expect the students or the teachers will be interested in either. I know that my time is running short, so I will end with this. School is not about repairing all social evils. It's about repairing one, the evil about ignorance. We have a responsibility to educate our youth. I implore you to fight for the continuation of these programs and see the value of their services. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I also have over 400 surveys from my students in the last program if you'd like to view them. Thank you.
Okay. Deborah Lanier. Did I say that correct?
I'm a bit short. Good evening. My name is Deborah Lanier, and I am a health education specialist for the school district. I am here tonight to I really would like for you to please, we have 3 health specialists in the county, which right now the proposal is to eliminate those positions for next year. I am currently in my 24th year of teaching. I teach 5th grade, all 7th grade students at Oakleaf Junior High and Green Cove Springs Junior High, and half of 7th grade at Keystone Heights High School. The Health Education Department provides elementary puberty education for 5th grade students, the 7th grade Too Good for Drugs program, and the 7th grade Healthy Choices program that correlate with the mandated health state standards. Our county health education programs present clear, unbiased information to elementary and junior high students about a wide variety of topics necessary for them to make possible life-changing decisions. This information is up to date and presented in an unthreatening classroom environment conducive to learning by only one of only 3 health teachers in our county. The fact is, health teachers like me presenting the sensitive state-mandated curriculum in the classroom creates a greater impact in students rather than the students' normal teachers. They feel more comfortable in asking us questions. Many of our students come from homes where their parents are unable to sit and have discussions about the topics covered. Some parents are not informed with the up-to-date information that health teachers present to students. There is also the possibility that students do not feel comfortable to have discussions with their parents about the sensitive information presented. Some students, unfortunately, get inaccurate information from the internet or their peers. These health education programs are necessary to present accurate information that they most likely will not get elsewhere regarding drugs and alcohol and sexual health. As a health teacher, I am in the classroom 4 days a week. In the last 7 months, I have taught 7th grade health education to 949 students and spent 8,049 classroom hours working to educate and promote health awareness. Health education is important to the overall health of all Clay County students. I can only imagine the negative impact that may result from not educating our youth through the implementation of this program and not providing students the forum to ask questions freely. Thank you for giving me this opportunity as a health teacher to express my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Jordan Maury.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Jordan Maury, and my address is on file. I, too, am a health specialist. That's my title. We are actually more of health educators, and I have been a teacher and an educator for Clay County for 20 years. My compadres there did a great job of explaining what we do. You know that now, tonight, you guys are going to be faced with a big decision. You have to make your decision on whether you're going to keep health in our schools. We're not allocated. There are 3 of us. Without the allocation, that's not just a cutback. Our program is totally eliminated. There will be no health education in Clay County. Now, I know that our county does have a large number of specialist positions. When I look at the list, I'm kind of surprised myself, and I'm going, wow, what are all of these people doing? However, one thing that I do know is that we are out in the schools. We aren't, when we have an office day occasionally, we're pretty happy about that because we finally get to get some paperwork done. But for the most part, we are out. We are serving our children. We do the Too Good for Drugs program. We do the Healthy Choices program, which is abstinence-based HIV/AIDS awareness program. We are at all of the junior high schools. We are in every science classroom. We offer our elementary classes. We've just started doing this the last couple of years, a puberty program, so that because the teachers aren't comfortable with this, so we want to provide them with our expertise. During the 2015-16, the beginning of our school year, we did the Too Good for Drugs program. We reached 2,216 students total, with a total of contact hours 15,885 hours. So we are in the classrooms. Last year during our Healthy Choices, because we're still doing that program now, we reached 2,468 students with a total of 15,468 contact hours. We are also taking care of Florida State Statute 1003.42, which provides that we need to, in our county, provide education for alcohol and narcotics, the benefits of sexual abstinence, prevention and control of diseases, and also in grades 7 through 12, the state has mandated that we provide information and education on teen dating violence and abuse, and we are covering all of those areas for our students in Clay County. Please reconsider allotting our program so that we can keep health for our students. Without it, it's our students that lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Ford.
Good afternoon. I'm here as a teacher for Wilkinson Junior High School.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ford, could you please just state your name and address for the
Linda Ford, 520 Southeast 28th Street.
Thank you.
But I'm also here as a parent. November 6, 2008 was a day I'll never forget. My 16-year-old daughter was killed by a driver who was impaired on drugs and alcohol. She was 13 years old, this young lady was, when she started taking drugs and alcohol. She didn't have a program like this in her school, and I know because I checked. She wasn't made aware of the dangers of what she did. Her life, of course, is in prison now, but my daughter lives no more. She never gets to graduate from high school. She never gets to do the things that other kids should have the opportunity to do. So I'm here to beg you, to plead with you, don't take this education away from these children. They're not getting it at home, I can promise you that, and they need this education so they can make better decisions than the ones that young lady did. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Rena Lee Paiva? Yeah, you're next. Go ahead, Tracy.
She asked me to read this, so I'd like to have another opportunity for CESPA if you can agree to that.
Sure.
On behalf of Rena Lee Paiva, the CCA has reviewed the 2016-17 allocations and has the following recommendations and concerns. We would like to see the 3 health education teachers remain in their current positions. Clay County has spent thousands of dollars investing in these teachers' professional development, textbooks, and workbooks in compliance with Florida Statute 1003.42. This statute requires all counties to educate our children on alcohol and narcotics and benefits of sexual abstinence and the prevention and control of disease. The entire reason we have these specialized teachers is A, we need to comply with the law, B, we wanted these issues handled consistently, C, we wanted these issues presented uniformly, and D, some of our science teachers did not want to address these issues because it is in conflict with their religious convictions. Remember, we are the only county in the state of Florida that has a special Pearson textbook for grade 5 that does not address issues such as STDs, HIV, and AIDS because the science teachers made a decision years ago to remove these subjects from the textbooks. We are now expected to believe that we will put these issues in the science map and science teachers will teach it. I know better. We should all know better. Our children will be the losers. All this does is feed into the archaic belief that if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. The CCA has received numerous complaints about the addition of guidance counselors not related to the number of students in a school. In fact, we have 2 concerns here. First, counselors are being allocated with no regards as to the number of students in the school. Second, the county has decided to hire counselors with no master's degree in guidance and counseling that is required by the job description here in the county and also a requirement for the DOE certification. We would not do this for school psychologists, media specialists, administrators, or social workers. Because all these disciplines require a master's degree, why does this county believe they can hire guidance counselors based on who you know or who you are related to? This gives Ms. Paiva no pleasure, and she did go to Mr. Brodsky to allow this and to not allow this, and please do not put her into that position. She has a relationship with the people that are impacted here. There are always alternatives, but that would require collaboration, and as usual, we believe the district's idea of collaboration is they'll just do it and we are expected to agree. We have filed a grievance on the hiring of an uncertified counselor. Number 3, we are also concerned about the elementary schools are again being made to choose their resource subjects. The CCA again asks that all elementary schools be equipped with art, music, PE, media, and computer technology, and not have to choose which subject of the schools will offer. The CCA believes in educating the entire child, and all children should be exposed to these critical subjects. CEB has been designated a D school, so what do we do with this, we have cut 2 teachers and added an administrator. Does that make any sense? It is a D school. We should be loading it up with instructional personnel, such as teachers, and it makes absolutely no sense to add another administrator. And then finally, the CCA recommends a pre-K teacher, 4-year-old group for Grove Park Elementary, and believes that the parents would be grateful for that in their area.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak, to your 3 minutes? Yeah.
Okay. I enjoyed the discussion earlier from Mr. Hamilton. FEA actually has a good relationship with Mr. Hamilton. But I wanted to say that I get to expose the elephant in the room in Clay County. And one of the reasons why I feel like I'm qualified to do that is because I grew up here. I'm the first graduating class at Middleburg High School. When I came back here, a lot of the folks that I actually had to file grievances against were some of my former teachers and administrators. And a lot of the teachers that I represent now were my colleagues in school, my classmates. So I'm going to tell you what the elephant in the room is. And the elephant in the room is the good old boy system. When I left here, I hate to say how many years ago, but when I left here when I was 18, which was many years ago, we didn't have very many schools in Clay County, so the good old boy system worked for us. We could, between nepotism and cronyism, we could hire our buddies and keep everybody, happy and make sure that our friends had the great administrative, high-paying jobs and just kind of perpetuate that. And it's been done for many, many years up until just recently, whenever we finally started to realize that maybe we are getting too big for that. So we have seen a lot of new folks come in, and we've seen some new names and new faces, and we're starting to outgrow that idea. But one of the problems that I think goes along with what Mr. Hamilton or Dr. Hamilton was saying earlier, and that is we can't keep doing the same things we've been doing. So the idea of continuing to give your buddies jobs, to make sure that they are your buddies are put in positions to hold other people's positions who have to be away for a while, to give promotions and high-paying jobs and raise people up from lower-paying coordinator jobs to higher-paying coordinator. All those things have to stop. We have to base things now strictly on what people are capable of doing. If we are still putting people in positions and they can't do the jobs, and we have to go out and hire consultants to do them, and we have to go and find someone who can tell us what we're doing, then that means we are doing things incorrectly. So the elephant in the room in Clay County is we have outgrown that. We need to stop it, and we need to start acting like the grown-up county we've become, which is twice the size it was when I was here when I was 18 years old, and we're still trying to operate in that old way.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Okay. That's the last of our yellow cards. So at this point, Mr. Van Zandt, did you want to?
Is Dr. Hamilton still here? I was able to thank him earlier, and I'd just like to say it publicly, even though it looks like he's slipped on out. To head back west, I really appreciated his time with us. I think we've learned a lot, and it set us on a course to do some things financially that we've needed to do for a while. As your superintendent, I've heard a common message across this district. All of you have expressed to me in one shape or fashion that you want to find a way to increase what we are able to do for our hardworking employees. I want to do those same things that you want to do. I want to increase salaries, but also have a responsibility to balance our budget along the way and get our financial health recharged before doing so. We've come a long way in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. So we've brought teacher leaders from across the district with a goal to reprioritize our budget based on 2 competing needs. 1, to ensure that we have the programs and services our children need to develop the skills for college and career success, and 2, to position us for financial stability in a sustainable fashion. With 85% of our budget going towards people, the fact is we can continue to have more people and pay them less, or have fewer people and pay them more. However, we cannot do both. We can do anything that we want to do, but we cannot do everything that we want to do. I challenge these leaders to make some tough decisions based on the following questions. How do these programs and positions directly impact and support improving student academic performance? Are there any duplication of services? Are there programs or services that can be delivered through a more innovative, effective, and less costly means? And are there any programs that are no longer needed given the changes in our instructional delivery? Last year, we were presented an allocation package that cut almost $1 million at the district office. It is from that point that we began this process again this year. I'm proud of the fact that Clay County is one of the top 2 districts in the state of Florida in the percent of the funding we do have being spent in the classroom. As we move closer to being a top 10 district in student achievement, I want us to also be a top 10 in every way, to include employee salaries. We currently rank in the top half of Florida districts, but I'm committed to repurposing resources and improving that position, and we've started that process. As a result, we'll present you tonight an allocation package that reflects some tough decisions made by a number of leaders who have collaboratively agreed that meeting the needs of kids and doing more for our employees would be our primary 2 goals. This allocation package moves us in the right direction, but it is not enough. Again, it is just a start. I do believe that our employees deserve more, but I've also said and believe that we cannot spend money that we do not have. The only option that we really have is to closely scrutinize every dollar and aggressively repurpose resources to meet those goals of improving student achievement and improving employee compensation. Moving forward, I want to solicit input from our stakeholders. We have to leave the us versus them at the door. We have to dispose of that argument and come together collaboratively and move forward as a school community. I'll be coming to you, teachers, staff, school board, parents, and business leaders, to hear your suggestions and to continue this challenging work together. The work of identifying the resources and redirecting them to better serve our highest purposes will produce stellar results for our students, employees, parents, and ultimately our community. I say all that just to frame the discussion that's going to take place here. I can't take any credit for it. I asked Dr. Hamilton to come after hearing him again this spring. Just super knowledgeable. And when I asked him to come, what I was really hoping to get out of it was kind of a reinvigoration to our senior staff and directors at the district level so that they could hear some of the things I get to hear when I go to Tallahassee and have a better insight on the budget, on resources, on tax revenues that come into Tallahassee and how that process works. Within a couple hours of him beginning to talk with us last Wednesday afternoon, talking with these teacher leaders, every one of them told me the same thing, and it's the same thing I've heard across the district for the last couple of years, is that everybody does agree. I've heard every school board member agree, every senior staff member agree, teachers, school-based administrators, support employees. Everybody would like to do more than we currently do for our employees. We can only spend $1 one time a piece. We don't have more dollars. Dr. Hamilton was right. I looked in the basement at the Capitol and the Senate building, the House building. I've never found the money machine or the green ink cartridge to print your own. So we have to live with what we have. I want to thank Ms. Cornegie for leading this process, and I'm going to stop talking, and let her continue to share with the board and the public what we've been doing the past few days. So, Ms. Cornegie.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you as well to Dr. Hamilton, as I did have an opportunity to thank him. And several of you have sent emails and texts, and I will certainly share that with him as well, so thank you for passing those along. Both of you, gentlemen, have given us a clear message and challenged our thinking and our practices. You heard it said, and I will repeat it, preparing the 16-17 allocation package was challenging. Given our financial position and our goals to meet the needs of our students and schools at a time of increased enrollment, we are required to make changes in how we allocate our scarce resources. Having heard Dr. Hamilton's message, we know that if we are ever going to put ourselves in a position to do more for our people, we have to repurpose existing resources to create the needed revenue. We were driven by our understanding that we can do anything we want, but we can't do everything we want. This process began last year with the reduction of the nearly $1 million at the district office, and moving into 16-17, we knew that new allocations to accommodate the student growth in class size would cost us a minimal estimate of $2.6 million. I first met individually with division leaders to look at all vacant positions and evaluate student program needs. These leaders in turn had conversations with principals and their staffs. These conversations resulted in the identification of $1.3 million in resources available for repurposing, leaving us in need of at least another $1.3 million. Last week, your leaders from across the district met with a goal to identify an additional $1.3 million. This was tough because each leader came with their programs and positions that are personal to them and professionally important to them. And they had to measure them against those 4 guiding questions that he just read, and I'm going to read them again. How do these programs and positions directly impact and support improved student academic performance? Are there duplications of services? Are there programs and services that can be delivered through a more innovative, effective, and less costly means? And are there programs that are no longer needed given changes in our instructional delivery model? Those 4 questions were given to us by Dr. Hamilton that he uses with every district that he goes into to help them with their allocations and their fiscal positions. Next, we shifted positions where we could from general funds to federal and grant funds. We looked at every instructional position that doesn't have students assigned, and we reprioritized based on those 4 questions. At the end of 2 very long and tiring days, we had saved in district allocations the $1.3 million and increased school allocations by $1.3 million, allowing us to address the cost associated with student growth without consuming the $2.6 million in projected new revenue as originally budgeted. Let me say again, this was not easy. While we tried to stay focused on the positions and not the people, we are a people business, and that's very hard to do. But I'm always reminded by what Rosalind Carter once said, that good leaders take people where they want to go, but great leaders take people where they need to go, but don't necessarily want to be. We have great leadership in Clay County. Leadership that has made some difficult decisions, some unpopular decisions, but the right decisions for the right reasons, and we're going to continue in this pursuit. So I want to thank you, board members, your employees who've worked very hard to make some hard decisions and right decisions. I appreciate your support of this allocation package, but before I turn this over to you, I'd like for Mr. Umball to make a few clarifying statements.
So just to be perfectly clear, we will continue to focus on student health in Clay County. There was, from several speakers there, the understanding that the program would go away. Let me assure you that we will stay committed to school board rules, including abstinence-based education, and our instructional division personnel will focus on health education and meet all legal and school board requirements. If you look, for instance, at one of the programs that we deliver to 7th graders. And as a former junior high teacher, I'll tell you, I've witnessed it myself. And let me be very, very clear. This has been a good program. These health education specialists are great. There should be nothing about this that leads you to believe otherwise. These are wonderful ladies, and they will be offered other employment in Clay County. Let me be clear about that. This is just a case of us looking and trying to focus for any examples of increasing our efficiency. And when Ms. Cornegie tells you that these were difficult choices, I cannot stress enough how brutal those couple of days were, as we were looking under every rock, trying to find every possible way that we could increase our efficiency and stop hemorrhaging cash, basically, to try to build up the reserves so that there are other options for you as a school board going forward. We will do everything that we can from our division. We have the personnel where we can support these programs. Let me, for instance, with the 7th grade, there's 15 lessons that come into the junior high. It happens in the science classroom. And of those 15, 9 deal with substance abuse, and 6 deal with health, HIV, and AIDS. We are talking, these are all Florida standards, okay, and the standards that have existed for forever, these aren't the ones that have changed. These are Florida standards for health as well as for science, and I am confident that we can forge a path ahead from our division to help our people, and we will provide whatever support is needed. The 5th grade puberty program that she mentioned, I can tell you I remember clear back when I was at Clay Hill, and Orpalk and I, she went off with the girls and I had the boys, and we had the puberty talk, showed the video. Please believe me when I tell you that I'm familiar with it, and we are certainly able to continue to support everything that we have done in schools. It is a small portion of our schools that reach out for the 5th grade that want that. We will continue to find ways to support people if they should be squeamish with any of the content. And I'll certainly answer questions later as you may wish.
Okay. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Have a motion for approval by Ms. Condon and a second by Ms. Gilhousen. Discussion.
I have a question
Okay.
for Mr. Umbach on that same on the health education program. How do we accomplish that with CVA?
How do we accomplish health education?
Right. How are we currently addressing these requirements that they talked about statutorily in our Clay Virtual Academy?
So again, it would be through your science standards, and they meet all current legislation and science standards through their science course.
Okay. Thank you.
Any discussion? Any other discussion?
I think everything's been said that, I would echo your sentiments that anytime there are people filling positions that we have to re-examine, it's heartbreaking. I mean, we are, like you said, in the people business, and I'm very proud of what we offer our students in health education and how to help them make healthy choices. I think that any parent would appreciate the school system's support in helping their children succeed in life in every aspect. So, like you said, these are difficult decisions, and we're faced with the prospect of how do we meet students' needs, how do we show give our teachers the compensation, the support that they deserve, and have a sound budget. And these are not easy decisions. And I went through the allocation package in detail and made my tally marks and asked my questions, and at the end of the day, it's not any easier to make this decision than it was when I first looked at it. So please know how valued you are, how much as a parent, as a school board member, I appreciate what you give to our students every day, and the families of this district. And I do take comfort in what you've said about these ladies having future employment.
Ms. Studdard, or
I was just going to ask Mr. Van Zandt about Mr. Umbach talked about the health specialists, but is there also a plan for the career specialists?
Thank you for your question. I would just like to echo what Mr. Umball and Ms. Corningy said. None of this is fun. I taught CTE briefly in this county, taught vocational ed, had a class full of kids that loved it. I had a little girl I hadn't seen. Well, I say little girl, she's probably 30-something now, come up and hugged my neck last night that I taught at Wilkinson Jr. in the 90s. Great programs, every one of these. These career specialists are people that I know and have worked with for years. Right after I got on the school board in 1998, and I will get to your question here, and if I forget, I'll ask it again. But I just want to let you know this hasn't been any fun for me either. After you can't be a teacher in Clay County and be on the school board, right? So I run for school board. I get deployed to the Middle East for the first time, come back, as a young helicopter pilot and get offered a job with the Guard full-time teaching the drug prevention program for the Florida National Guard. And we taught it all over the state. One of you mentioned the beer goggles, the ones that simulate the alcohol vision after you've been drinking, and the smoke lungs and the tobacco lungs and gateway drugs and marijuana. And at the time, we taught life management skills in the high schools. So we were new to Sunshine State Standards and FCAT and all that good stuff. So I rewrote the Guard's curriculum to meet the Sunshine State Standards. Everybody loved it. We flew helicopters to school. We did the goggles, did the lungs. We gave great lessons. I showed the LMS teachers, just let Captain Van Zandt come to class. I'll handle the whole thing for a week, cover all your standards. Everybody loved it. And it's good stuff. And it was good then, it's good now. What these ladies are doing in the health is good now. What the career specialists are doing in CTE is good. Nobody doesn't like any of the work that's currently going on. We like it, we've done it. However, we've had to redesign everything to move in. It's no longer 1990-something, 2002, it's 2016. And just like the military had to reprioritize our budget in the middle of 2 unpopular wars and save all the helicopters for flying where we really needed them in the Middle East, we as a school system are finally catching up to the things that we didn't address in 08 and 09 and 10, when it would have made sense to everybody to address all these issues when we were, like Dr. Hamilton was talking, bridging that gap with federal stimulus dollars and everything else. It would have made sense to everybody then. So through the addition of academy coaches, through the guidance counselors that are already overworked, through CTE teachers that are collaborating with each other in interdisciplinary projects, we will meet those criteria the very best we can. So we'll have to give more thought to this redesign. I don't see a dip in services. Is it going to be done just how it was? Absolutely not. Do we hurt and not enjoy doing this? Absolutely. So that's kind of just, we're all still a little getting used to this idea ourselves, but this is the best ideas that all the best people we could bring in the room that are teacher leaders could bring forward to you tonight. And if I didn't address anything specifically enough on the CTE, I apologize. I did see Miss Stewart in the back of the room. And
No, I was just wondering about the people that are in those positions.
oh, we'll have places for them. There's nothing in this allocation package would take a current Clay County School Board employee and displace them without a job. We'll be able to find a place, and they'll be offered jobs, they'll be able to apply for jobs, they'll be able to be placed, but everybody's not going to get to stay exactly where they are doing exactly what they're doing the way they're doing it.
Will they be given some sort of preference or something, since we're changing the way we do what they do, or is that not?
I see Mr. Broski reaching, so I'll let him answer. Maybe I'm supposed to.
Both on the support side and on the instructional side, PSC teachers and multi-year contract people will in fact have a position. And there's a process in place to place them into a job through the process. And the instructional side, that's our phase 2 hiring phase in which that would occur.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Broski, are they all PSC?
On the instructional side, the health teachers that came and spoke tonight are PSC.
What about the career?
I believe, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I know at least one is multi-year, and I think one is annual. I'd have to look.
Okay. Is it my turn?
It's your turn, Ms. Studdard.
I was scribbling notes and it's not in order here, so I'm just going to jump around, I guess, as I was thinking about things when people said things. One thing I do want to ask, I had talked to Ms. Roth this morning, and she was going to get me a question. I was at the DARE graduation for Grove Park, and Officer Thigpen told me that she does it at Orange Park and Grove Park. And I was just curious, do we have DARE in the other elementary schools still that are not in the city limits of Orange Park?
Ms. Cornegay, do you have an answer for that?
I was just curious. It's off
So I will ask, Ms. Roth, did you get her that answer by any chance?
She said she would have it by 4 o'clock.
Well, I would not want to steal that opportunity.
Okay. Oh, you are so
You can-
savvy.
If you'd like to come to the podium, Ms. Roth, that's fine.
I do not, in fact, have the affirmative answer for you. I have had to make some phone
But
calls
just
to
so-
police departments to actually find that piece
Well,
out.
I just
so
wondered, because I think the town of Orange Park probably
ma'am.
helps
They do.
fund the DARE, and it just made me think, years ago, I remember going to DARE programs at different schools, and
Correct.
I have not heard, perhaps if there was an elementary principal sitting out there, could someone tell me, do we have DARE programs in the other elementary schools?
we do not.
Thank you. Do they have anything like DARE in the elementary schools? Thank you. That, I have my answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Jeez. See, if you dig deep
So
enough.
which
you
school
can-
is it? It's only one school that has it?
Well, see, in the town of Orange Park, in the town limits, there's Orange Park Elementary and Grove Park. But the town of Orange Park, the town council,
They're the ones
I
that-
think that they help fund that. And Officer Thigpen has been doing it for more years than I can count. And it just occurred to me as I was at the DARE graduation, I wonder if the other schools have that.
We
'cause it's
used to
really-
have it at Ridgeview, because when
Yeah.
my kids went to Ridgeview
Well, that's what I
Elementary,
was
they went
thinking
through
years
it, yeah.
I remember going to them, and it had just never dawned on me that I hadn't been invited to DARE at these other schools in a long time. Okay, that's a side note, but it's something that I wanted to know the answer to. Okay, looking at all these different things, one thing I wanted to ask Ms. Cornegay, could you tell me, this committee that you're talking about, the stakeholders that met a couple days, what is this committee and who was on it that come up with 1.3 and so?
I'm not sure that it was referred to as a committee. It was all of your district leaders.
Like who?
All of the senior staff, all of their supervisors, all of those who are directly responsible for the allocations and specific programs and services. So it was a room of about 15-ish or so folks that gathered to do this work.
So supervisors and directors, were there any school principals on this committee? Or your group, if you don't want to call it a committee?
No, not on the original conversations that took place were individual conversations with principals. We do intend on bringing principals together. We talked to them, superintendent talked to them today about continuing to look at our resources and reprioritizing those resources and bringing other folks together to do this work with us. So as we said, this is just the start. We've got a long ways to go if we truly want to right this financial ship. And so but we will be working with bringing in some other stakeholder groups as well.
Okay. And that's fine and good. It's just I tend to move a little slower. You know, just like when we were going to move a neighborhood in Oakleaf overnight and then it got undone. Thank goodness. We need to stop and think what we're doing. But I understand this is the first start with this group, if I won't call it a committee, the group that met with you. But something this serious, we need to make some big budget cuts in order to get ourselves back whole financially. We didn't get in this hole overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. I hate to say this because I know you're going to cringe, but I would love it if we could, and I know you've got April the 1st deadline on allocations. Here we are sitting here at the end of March. I would have preferred this start a while back to give everybody some time to not only meet with your group that you met with, your senior staff, but also to have time to have some input maybe from some principals who might have some ideas, and also members of the public, parents, business people. I, as a board member, and I'm sure the other board members would agree, it would have been nice just to hear the conversation, to be able, because the more people you have involved, there's some pretty smart people out there. I just think that there are ways to cut that maybe we haven't come up with yet. And, you know, getting the backup last Tuesday, and then, you know, with Good Friday and Easter, I have to admit I did not study the allocations on Good Friday and Easter weekend. And then last night when I got home from a meeting, the email started, and it was throughout the night, and then early this morning, and then all day today. In fact, I've still got about 4 or 5 who I haven't been able to respond to because they were coming in as I was trying to get down here for the meeting, and I haven't even had a chance to read them in entirety. And I'm sure all of us have been inundated with emails. I know we need to make budget cuts. We desperately do. I just want to make sure that we are doing it the smartest way that we can. Things that are in the best interest of the students, for sure. I know that some of the emails that I was able to read this morning and then last night, some of the points that were brought up was that the current science teachers are already burdened enough with all the testing and requirements and mandates and so forth, and that they may not feel comfortable or even really don't want to get put into that situation where they're not really specialists in that subject. I got tickled when I was listening to Mr. Van Zant talking about the way it was in the old days. I can remember in elementary school, and I think it was Mr. Umball, the boys go off in one room, the girls go off in the other, and I never will forget the name of my program. It was called You're a Young Lady Now. See, it made an impact on me. I remember it, I think 5th, 6th grade, something like that. Even back in the old days, we did that. One thing I'm concerned with right now is our budget has been, our fund balance has been below the 3% the last 3 years. And we all know that something has got to give, and we talked about this at the workshop, and we were going to we had like a 2-year plan that we were going to work toward getting back up to the 3%. I still think that sometimes, you know, if you may want to save $1,000, and you may say, I'd like to have it by next March. I want to have $1,000 extra, take a vacation or something. Sometimes it might take you 2 years to get to that $1,000 in order to have that vacation. Sometimes you just got to have a little bit more time to think about things. One other thing that I'm just going through my notes, if y'all will excuse me. One thing that I'm very concerned about right now is the employee morale. It's in my years on the school board, I've never seen the morale of our staff, our support staff, and our teachers as low as it is right now. And I believe I heard, I think it was Ms. Butler said that, you know, we're doing these cuts to support and the teachers, but we've got a .2 administrator added at one of our elementary schools, and that may be well needed. I tried to call today to get some more information, and I wasn't able to get all of it, but it's the perception of the respect for our employees in trying to do this. I know the employees live within a budget, all of them, as we all live in a budget, but you've got to get some buy-in from the stakeholders when you are budgeting. And if you do have, for lack of a better word, a workshop or something where you really can show people that you have gone through every area, you've looked at administration, you have looked at support staff, you have looked at instructional staff, you have looked under every rock, and let them buy into this and understand where we are. Who knows, they may come up with a good idea. One thing I do agree with Mr. Van Zandt on, he said that the us versus them persona has got to end. I could not agree more. Our employees are not our enemies, and they. This just needs to stop. We have got to work together, and you've got to do that through collaboration, not deciding things and putting it up here and saying this is the way it's going to be, we can't do it any other way, and this is the best we've come up with, and so this is the way it is. I mean, all these people that got up and spoke tonight, the career specialists, the health specialists, the parents, one of the emails even came from a former administrator who's now retired from our district. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing yet, but I saw what he was talking about. But he was very instrumental in starting our career in tech ed and the academies and so forth. I mean, some of these emails really made good points, and I think we ought to take it to heart. I'm certainly not an accountant or a CPA, but I do think that I understand people, and I understand that they don't like having things just rammed down their throat, lickety-split. We've got to do better in collaborative discussions. So that's all I have to say.
Ms. Condon, did you want to add something to that?
I do. I agree that the us versus them has to stop, and I heard in your insinuation, Ms. Studdard, that when you said that about the perception about administration, school administration comes from the teacher ranks, and they are a valuable part of the leadership of our schools. They handle discipline things, they handle truancy, they handle issues with kids, and I don't want them to think we don't value them too. I value all of our school employees. My 7th grader completed Too Good for Drugs and Healthy Choices this year, and much to his chagrin. He would rather have not known about all that kind of stuff. And he told me, informed me of all the different names that you can call marijuana, that he had no idea. So I guess you were effective, he learned it. And I do value that, and that's why I ask about how we accomplish that in Clay Virtual, because I know that those are kids I want to make sure we're reaching also. And so I do think, part of our I just went blank on our little tagline, but, what's our little innovation?
Innovate, engage, and empower.
Okay, so our innovation.
Not necessarily in that order.
The innovation one was the one I was thinking of, and we have to find a different way to do things. I come from the corporate world, and when you manage your budget in the corporate world, you're handed a target, and you're told, go cut your budget to this amount, and you don't get a choice. And not only do valuable programs go away in that kind of model, but you end up cutting things that don't need to be cut. And because I don't think that you can go and just across the board cut. So I don't want to see us just cut programs that we can't find. And clearly the message in this is that employees are not losing their jobs. And that is important to me. But I also care about employee morale, and I've talked to so many employees, and raises matter. And what I heard Ms. Cornegie say is that in order to fund the additional needs of our additional students, we had to find $1.3 million from somewhere, or it was coming from that $2.6 million. And so you were able to find that. And my assumption, and maybe you can clarify if this is an invalid assumption, but my assumption was when you said you brought together senior staff, those are professionals that have qualifications that are pretty extensive in those job descriptions to be qualified to run their programs. Is that true? And so if that's true, then we need to trust them to be the professionals. I'm a professional environmental scientist. I have no knowledge on how you should run a CTE program because that's not my chosen profession. And so I do value the people who you had input from. And I would also expect, as things change and you get into the budgeting process, that if you find that you need to go put these allocations back in, as you did in September and October, you came back to us and said, we have allocations that we didn't have in the original plan, and we can put them back in. I do want to make sure that we meet our standards, and so, Mr. Umbaugh, please make sure that those are met. But it's just we have to evolve. And I really heard Dr. Hamilton's message loud and clear. We have to find a way, and I do expect that you'll go back and look at, things at the school level and challenge the principals to go back with their staffs and their teachers and their support staffs to find other ways. But I don't want to cut the programs that you have put your time and effort and probably your own money into. And I value those programs, and so hopefully, my understanding is that you're all science teachers, and so hopefully you will be 3 of the science teachers delivering this program in addition. But I just don't, employee raises are important to me. I told the superintendent that we could be at odds if he didn't find a way to get that done, and that's more valuable to me than keeping doing things the way that we were doing them just because we're doing them that way. As long as our kids are being met and it's a nice, and I would really like to see these people in jobs in our district. The same kind of valuable job. So that's what I had to say.
I did want to add one thing that I was thinking about that I didn't mention when I had my turn is I'd like to understand more too about the duplication between the in career and the academies and with the career. I don't quite understand how if there's a duplication in those services. So, that's doesn't have to. I don't have to learn that today, but at some point I would like to know how that works. With, I know Ms. Stewart will be glad to explain it all to me. Not today. No, you don't have to get up and talk today, Ms. Stewart.
Okay, I just a couple things. I don't want to go on and on because I know we're all. It's been a long presentation. I think the big message that I heard, the big takeaway message that I heard is a message that I also hear in corporate America a lot too, and that is, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And so it's time, I think, if we want to quit getting what we always got, which is, at least for as long as I've been on the board, a fund balance that's below the state required minimum, the inability to give teachers raises and do the things that we need to do to improve student performance, then we have to do things differently. And so I just want to congratulate and applaud the superintendent, Ms. Cornegay, and all of the folks that got together and spent the grueling hours that they did to look through all of this stuff and to try to come up with innovative ways to be able to do what we need to do, prioritize, and to be able to come up with the cuts that they were able to come up with in terms of the dollar savings. I heard a couple things about stakeholder buy-in. Ms. Studdard, I know you mentioned you were concerned about whether or not all of the stakeholders truly had buy-in. I heard that. I heard that there was initial conversations between principals and the folks at the schools and then they came back and met. And so I heard that there was stakeholder buy-in all across the organization. In terms of collaborative discussions, I never have a problem picking up the phone and calling any one of our folks on the staff or at the district office to be able to answer questions. I think there is a lot of collaboration going on. I think I'm not concerned about a lack of collaboration. So I don't have a problem with that. I think that you guys are doing a very good job of collaborating with everybody, getting the buy-in that you need, trusting the people in the positions who know those programs best to be able to come up with the cuts and the, you know, reorganization or whatever you want to call it, that you guys asked for, and still be able to meet those 4 priorities that you mentioned. I also want to add that our teachers are the lifeblood of this district, and as such, as a result of what they do, our school system is one of the most sought out districts in the state, and we owe that to our teachers and to our staff and to everybody that works in this district, every employee. It's not one over the other, it's one Clay team. And I highly value our teachers and our staff and our employees. And I heard each and every one of you a couple weeks ago that you guys need a salary increase. And so I hear you. I have always been committed to that, but in a way that is financially responsible. We can't do that and then break the bank at the same time. And so that's why I am fully supportive of this allocation package. I think that it was a lot of hard work. I think it is a, you know, it's a tough position to be in, but I think that we have to step forward in terms of starting to do things differently. We have to be innovative with the resources that we have, and I believe that we have the most innovative employees, and we've already seen them do incredible innovative things, and so I have all the confidence in the world that they're going to be able to do what they need to do with this allocation package and be able to move us forward and to be able to meet the priorities that have been set forth. So I just wanted to, those are just my thoughts, and I don't have any other questions or comments or anything. So I'll bring it back to the board. I had a motion for approval by Ms. Condon and a second by Ms. Gilhousen. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Motion carries 3-1 with Ms. Studdard dissenting. Okay. Presentations from the audience. We do not have any superintendent requests.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. For those of you who may have tuned in and watched this live on your computer or whatever device you're looking at it with and listening, just like to reiterate 2 things. One, this was no fun. I remember the movie Remember the Titans, when Denzel Washington was meeting his first integrated football team. He said, "No fun, no fun, sir." Me and my wife were having that discussion last night because this was no fun. But it's something we need to do to move forward, and I think it is going to set us in a more financially sustainable and stable position. Second thing is, every time we get up here and start talking about dollars and cents, we end up talking about administrators. Most of the administrators in this room and in this district, vice a few that are experts at transportation or IS or finance, building, something like that, which are just a handful, are teachers. They're teachers that taught for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years and then went in to administration through some kind of night school, virtual school, online school, got a graduate degree in some kind of education administration or education leadership, and put themselves out there to lead our formations in our schools. Now, you don't have to look very hard to realize that these people do a very good job of empowering their actual faculties, because you can look at your budget, school board, and see that there's only 3% of your folks are administrators. You can look just to the north and across the river and see it takes about 5% of administrators in Duval County. I haven't looked at a whole bunch of the other counties, but we are not at all overstaffed administratively. So we have to depend on our teachers and our faculties and our support employees to do a whole lot of work without a whole lot of supervision, while these administrators are on the front lines getting up very early. And I know several of them's patterns, so my phone starts ringing and texting about 5 or so in the morning, and it goes to some of them are night owls, and I get to work around the clock with all of them when they're talking to me. So I just wanted to bring that out, and there's a lot of administrators here tonight and a couple of teachers and support people, and we appreciate you all.
School board requests. Ms. Condon?
I have two things. One, when I became a school board member, I signed up with the Florida School Board Association for a mentor program. And what they do is they take new school board members and pair you up with a very experienced school board member, and it gives you someone to ask questions and things like that. And so I get advice and I ask questions from my mentor. And I learned something in my conversation with her this week, and that was that when a school district has gone below 3% and then you tell the state, and the state, you give a plan to come back above that 3%, she said she's seen it in a number of districts through the years. If you then go back below 3%, once you've restored your fund balance, the state will come in and take over your district. They consider the first time, okay, something happened, you went wrong, but the second time, it's egregious. And so that was news to me. Doesn't really clearly outline that in the statute, but apparently that is past practice as far as what she has seen sitting as a school board member for decades. At any rate, and that was my first thing. And then my second thing is one of our employees, Gavin Rollins, is being deployed to serve our country for a year, leaving April 4th. And I just wanted to tell him publicly, thank you for your service in the Condon household, whether you're a soldier, a seaman, an airman, or a Marine. When you go to serve our country and defend our freedoms, to have meetings like this, and to live in the greatest country in the world, our prayers are with you. And it really is, really touches my heart that anyone is willing to serve. And I know we have lots of military families in our schools and our communities, but Clay County School District is losing an employee, and he's going to defend our freedoms, and I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Gilhousen?
You know, I'll just echo your sentiments that this meeting was not enjoyable. Anytime we have to talk about difficult budget decisions, whether it's at home or in a public setting, it's painful. And I am hopeful of where we're headed, this being behind us, and I look forward to the opportunities that will be available in the coming year because of these difficult decisions we've made now.
Thank you. I'm going to limit my comments because I don't have much of a voice, so I'm just going to thank you all for a good board meeting. Thank you for the folks that came and spoke, and thank you again for the staff and the employees who worked so hard on putting this together. Really appreciate it. Any attorney requests? Okay. Well, with that, this meeting is adjourned.